My 26F brother, 22M, and his fiancée of nearly 2 years, 21F, are planning a wedding that is an etiquette nightmare, and I'm not sure how to. I want to share a story about my brother Andrew and his fiancée Christy, who are planning a wedding that has turned into quite the etiquette conundrum. As the older sister, I thought I'd be involved in the wedding planning process, but it quickly became apparent that things were going in a direction I never expected. Andrew is 22, and Christy is 21. They've been engaged for nearly 2 years, and their wedding date is set for April 25, 2015. Initially, Christy asked me to be a bridesmaid, which I was honored by. However, as the planning progressed, the requests started piling up. She wanted my daughter to be the flower girl, my husband to be a groomsman, and she even asked me to do her makeup and engagement photos as a gift. On top of that, I was expected to help with all the details on the big day. It felt like a lot to juggle, especially considering the costs involved. I had to sit down with them and gently explain that I wouldn't be able to fulfill all these roles. I wanted to be supportive, but I simply couldn't afford the specific dress, shoes, and makeup she had in mind, not to mention the costs for my husband's tuxedo and my daughter's flower girl dress. They seemed disappointed but accepted my decision, and for a while, everything seemed fine. Fast forward to a recent dinner at my house. Andrew and Christy excitedly shared their wedding plans, and I quickly realized that their vision was a bit unconventional. They want to have an outdoor ceremony, despite the fact that April weather can be quite unpredictable. Just the previous year, it had been freezing with icy winds and rain on the same date. When we brought this up, Christy confidently replied that she would be warm in her heavy dress. I couldn't help but think about the poor bridesmaids in their strapless dresses and flip-flops. I also had concerns about my 1-year-old daughter, who would be expected to wear a T-length dress with no sleeves in potentially frigid temperatures. I knew I had to find a way to express that I wouldn't put my child in that situation. But how do you say I'm not risking my daughter's health for your wedding day? As we continued discussing the plans, I learned that they were adamant about keeping the April 25th date, despite suggestions to consider a warmer month. They insisted that the date had no special significance for them, but they were set on it, claiming it was their day, and the guests' comfort didn't matter. Their ceremony is set to take place under a gazebo, and they've chosen a family friend to officiate. This friend has a lovely history with our family and has officiated other ceremonies beautifully. When we suggested that Andrew and Christy meet with him beforehand to discuss their relationship and create a personal ceremony, they were uninterested. They simply wanted a quick, do you, you're married, approach. It felt like they were missing the point of having someone close to them officiate. Then came the bombshell about the wedding luncheon. After the ceremony, they planned to have a small luncheon with only the wedding party, which would exclude the officiant and many other guests, including siblings and family members. They expected everyone else to find their own lunch and then return for the reception, where we would all be responsible for setting up decorations while Andrew and Christy got ready. To top it all off, Andrew announced that my grandmother wouldn't be invited because she didn't remember who Christy was at my daughter's first birthday party. Now, let me provide some context here. My grandmother is 80 years old and has met Christy only once, almost 2 years ago. With a family of that size, over 65 grandchildren, it's no wonder she struggles to keep track of everyone. As I sat there, absorbing all this information, I couldn't help but wonder how to navigate this situation. I wanted to be supportive of my brother and his fiancée, but their plans seemed to disregard the feelings and comfort of their family and friends. It was turning into a wedding planning nightmare, and I was left wondering how to express my concerns without causing a rift in the family. So what do you think? How should I approach this delicate situation? I'm all ears for advice. I find myself in a bit of a predicament with my brother and his fiancée, who are planning their wedding. As I watch their preparations unfold, I can't help but feel a sense of dread about the etiquette, or lack thereof, surrounding their big day. To give you some context, my brother Andrew is 22, and his fiancée Christy is 21. They've been engaged for nearly 2 years, and while I want to support them, their wedding plans seem to be an etiquette nightmare. It all started when I learned that they decided not to invite our grandmother, the only living grandparent we have left. This decision came as a shock, especially considering how much effort she has put into being a part of our lives. She drives an hour to attend Andrew's school performances and sends birthday cards to all of us, including Andrew. Yet she's being left out of this significant family event, simply because Christy forgot her name. When I shared this news with my dad, he was understandably hurt and angry. He made it clear that he wouldn't attend the wedding if his mother wasn't invited. I can see where he's coming from. It feels incredibly disrespectful to exclude someone who has been such a loving presence in our lives. As I continued to reflect on their wedding plans, I noticed a pattern of behavior that struck me as inconsiderate. Andrew and Christy seem to want a grand wedding without wanting to shoulder the responsibilities that come with it. They've picked out extravagant details, like a beautiful wedding dress and matching gowns for the wedding party. But when it comes to covering costs or providing food for their guests, they seem to think it's someone else's job. My family and I had previously put together a wedding planning book for them, filled with tips on budgeting, etiquette, timelines, and checklists. We invested a lot of time and effort into this resource, hoping it would guide them in planning a lovely event. However, it's clear they haven't taken it to heart. For instance, they expect their wedding party to pay for their own meals, while they themselves will be dining on something as casual as fast food. I've attended a handful of weddings in my life, and even helped plan one, so I'm not entirely new to the process. I believe in modern weddings that break away from traditional expectations, but there's a limit to how much responsibility should fall on the guests and wedding party. It's simply not fair to expect everyone else to cover costs and do the heavy lifting while they enjoy the spotlight. As I pondered how to address these issues, I realized that I needed to tread carefully. Christy is quite sensitive and tends to take any form of criticism personally. Given that we work together, maintaining a peaceful relationship is essential. After discussing my concerns with my parents, they decided to have a conversation with Andrew about a few key points. They planned to suggest that they should clearly communicate on the invitations that no food or refreshments would be served, as this is not typical for weddings. They also agreed that our grandmother should be invited, and that the officiant, who is a friend and is offering his services for free, should receive a gift as a token of appreciation. As for me, I've resolved to set some boundaries regarding what I will and won't do for the wedding. I want to ensure that my daughter stays warm during the ceremony and that I'm not burdened with excessive responsibilities. I'm hopeful that this conversation will lead to a better understanding of what is appropriate and respectful when planning a wedding. I genuinely want their day to be a success, but I can't force them to plan better. That responsibility lies with them. I'll be sure to share an update on how the conversation goes once it happens. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. Planning a wedding can be a daunting task, especially when you're young and overwhelmed. I found myself in the middle of this chaos when my brother, Andrew, and his fiancée, Christy, began preparing for their big day. At just 22 and 21 years old, respectively, they were navigating the complexities of wedding planning with a budget that barely covered the essentials. Christy was relying heavily on the $2,000 her parents had offered, and it was clear she was feeling the pressure. During a conversation with my mom, Christy expressed her frustration about Andrew's lack of involvement. He kept saying, "Whatever you want," whenever she sought his opinion, which only added to her stress. My mom and I tried to explain that Andrew likely wanted Christy to have the day she envisioned, but it was evident that she needed more support. We could see that she was a young woman, somewhat naive and perhaps a bit passive-aggressive, trying to manage an event that felt far beyond her capabilities. As we chatted, we brainstormed affordable wedding ideas. Christy seemed to appreciate the suggestions, particularly the concept of a small ceremony with just 50 close friends and family, followed by a luncheon. This would allow them to celebrate with those who mattered most, while keeping costs manageable. She was also open to the idea of a larger reception later, where more distant relatives and acquaintances could join in the festivities, albeit with lighter refreshments. One of the key points we discussed was the importance of planning for inclement weather. Christy had initially wanted an outdoor ceremony at a gazebo, but after some gentle nudging, she recognized that it would be wiser to prepare for indoor arrangements. This shift in perspective was a relief, as I had been worried about how my little one would cope with unpredictable weather. I also offered to help with Christy's makeup for the wedding, suggesting we keep it simple and budget-friendly. However, I made it clear that my hands would be full with the baby on the wedding day, so I wouldn't be able to assist with setting up decorations. My mom and I encouraged Christy to enlist the help of their bridal party, who were mostly young and childless, making them more available to lend a hand. As we continued to discuss the wedding, Christy mentioned wanting a bridal shower. It struck me that no one in her family had offered to throw one for her, which felt disheartening. My mom and I decided to step in and organize a shower ourselves, hoping to give Christy the celebration she deserved. Reflecting on the situation, I realized that the negativity surrounding their wedding plans had likely caused Christy and Andrew to shut down. They seemed to interpret our concerns as criticism rather than support. By sitting down with Christy and explaining that we were there to help, we created a more open dialogue. We reassured her that she could decline any ideas she didn't like, and that we weren't trying to take over the planning process. As time passed, I felt more comfortable with the role I could play in their wedding preparations. While I still worried about their maturity and readiness for such a significant commitment, I hoped that they would grow together through this experience. Fast forward a few months, and the situation took an unexpected turn. Christy reached out to Andrew, wanting to discuss wedding plans with him and my mom. I was playing with my little one when I overheard Ray's voices coming from the back room. Concerned, I wondered if they were having a serious disagreement or just a heated discussion about the wedding. Despite the tension, I remained hopeful that they would find their footing and create a beautiful celebration that reflected their love. While the road ahead was uncertain, I was committed to supporting them in any way I could. After all, weddings are not just about the event. They are about the journey of love and partnership that follows. I never thought I'd find myself in the middle of such a wedding etiquette nightmare, but here I am, navigating the turbulent waters of my brother Andrew's relationship with his fiancée, Christy. They had been engaged for nearly 2 years, and I was starting to think that their wedding was going to be a beautiful celebration. Little did I know, things were about to take a dramatic turn. It all started when Christy came over to talk to Andrew, but instead of wedding planning, she dropped a bombshell. She wasn't sure if she wanted to marry him anymore. To make matters worse, she had prepared a list of grievances against him, detailing 4 specific things she believed were irreparable. My mom, who was present during this conversation, quickly intervened, urging Christy to keep her list to herself and suggesting they seek couples counseling instead. Andrew was understandably upset. He had already attempted to go to counseling 6 months prior, but Christy had dismissed it, claiming it was awkward and that she preferred to blame others rather than take responsibility for her actions. It was a shocking admission, to say the least. To add to the tension, Andrew had proposed to her after she had been hinting at wanting to get engaged. Now, just 2 months before their wedding, she was pulling the rug out from under him. As I tried to process this, I learned that Christy had gone on an all-day hike with an old friend named Zach, who had just returned from a 2-year mission trip. This outing raised eyebrows among our family and friends, especially since Christy had previously been vocal about her disapproval of Andrew talking to other women. Yet here she was, spending an entire day in the mountains with a guy. I couldn't help but feel frustrated by the double standards. Valentine's Day rolled around, and I asked Andrew about his plans. He casually mentioned that he would be having dinner with Christy and Zach. I was taken aback, but tried to remain supportive. Andrew, being the trusting person he is, didn't see any issue with it. The next day, Christy dropped another bombshell. She wasn't sure about the wedding anymore. As the days passed, Christy's behavior became even more erratic. She'd chopped off her hair in a style that was, well, less than flattering. It was baffling, especially since she had previously criticized Andrew for wanting to dye his hair. Then came the therapy session, which Andrew seemed optimistic about, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling out of control. The following weekend, Christy announced that she was visiting her mother, who had always disapproved of Andrew. I hoped that maybe this would lead to some clarity for her, but when I asked Christy how her weekend went, I was blindsided by her response. She and Andrew had broken up. I was shocked and didn't know what to say, so I simply expressed my sympathy and returned to my work. What followed was a lengthy monologue from Christy about her time with Zach. She seemed so happy, recounting how they had spent the weekend together, laughing and bonding over trivial things. It was hard to listen to her gushing about Zach, especially when she had just ended her engagement. My coworker Alicia, sensing the tension, chimed in with questions that only seemed to highlight Christy's questionable priorities. As Christy continued to talk about her plans to move in with her sister and her upcoming trip to California, I felt a mix of disbelief and concern. Meanwhile, I was on the phone with my mom, who was helping Andrew move his belongings out of their apartment. The whole situation felt surreal, and I couldn't help but wonder how my brother was coping with this sudden upheaval in his life. In the end, it was clear that this wedding was not going to happen, and the fallout from Christy's decision would leave a lasting impact on our family. As I watched my brother navigate this heartbreak, I realized that sometimes love can be messy, and the road to happiness is often filled with unexpected twists and turns. I never imagined that my brother's wedding planning would turn into such a chaotic saga. My brother Andrew is 22, and his fiancée Christy is 21. They had been engaged for nearly 2 years, and while I had hoped for a beautiful celebration, the reality was far from that. Things took a turn when my mother, feeling overwhelmed by the situation, decided to intervene. One day, she packed up all the wedding materials that Christy had neglected to work on and dropped them off at our workplace. It was quite the spectacle. She literally shoved the box towards Christy with her foot. I could tell my mom was not thrilled with Christy's overly cheerful greeting when she arrived. You see, my mom had just come from taking my sick little girl to the doctor, and the last thing she needed was to deal with wedding drama. After the awkward drop-off, Christy and her sister retreated to the back room, giggling and whispering. I could only imagine the unkind things they were saying about my mom, but honestly, I remained calm throughout this entire ordeal. I was at work, and I didn't want to mix personal issues with my professional life. Deep down, though, I felt a wave of relief. Christy had been a source of constant criticism and emotional turmoil for Andrew. Her family had their own issues, and I was grateful that my brother was finally free from her toxic influence. He returned home, and despite the heartbreak, he seemed to be doing well considering everything that had just happened. Andrew had been in therapy, trying to work through the problems in their relationship. He had hoped for a resolution, but it became clear to him that it was time to move on. I think he also started to realize that Christy was not the person he thought she was. Later that day, I went to the bathroom during my shift, and I overheard Christy complaining about a text she received from Andrew. He had asked her if she was really staying with her parents or with someone else. She vehemently denied any physical relationship, but admitted to spending a lot of time with another guy. It was as if her cheerful demeanor vanished in an instant. You can't play the victim when you're guilty of emotional betrayal. Writing all of this out gives me a sense of peace. I feel heartbroken for Andrew, but I truly believe he dodged a bullet. He's committed to continuing his personal therapy, wanting to resolve his issues so he can build healthier relationships in the future. As for me, I no longer have to deal with Christy's negativity in my personal life, although I still have to see her and her sister at work. I'm determined to keep things professional and remind them to leave their personal drama at home. If they ever disrespect Andrew or my family at work, I'm ready to stand my ground. In the end, the wedding that almost was has turned into a lesson in resilience and self-discovery for my brother. And as for Christy, well, let's just say I'm relieved that they are no longer getting married.